Hey everyone, welcome back to Office Hours. We're going to go ahead and get started. A couple of housekeeping things before we go. Just wanted to let you know we're streaming on both Teams and YouTube. So if you want to ask any questions, we have both those chats open. We are ready to answer some questions, or just while we're getting started here, feel free to share those. Maybe say where you're tuning in from, and we'll make sure to collect those and get back to those later. Yeah, and if you have questions that would maybe be better served with coming on stage and chatting with us, and not exactly in a text fashion, you're welcome to do that. Just let us know and we can bring you up later. That is not on the YouTube side of things. So if you are on YouTube and want to come on stage, then hop over to the Teams version. We'll put a link to that in the chat in a minute. So just agenda, we're going to spend 15 minutes or so to review some of the questions that we've gotten recently in the community. And yeah, like I said, while we're doing that, feel free to post your questions, and we'll spend about 45 minutes after that going through the rest of the questions. So with that, I'm going to switch over to Matt and Mike, and we can get going.
Cool. So which question are we starting with first?
I think the first one we got from someone who was asking about if Microsoft has a particular feature enabled related to dashboards or a view, like a calendar view that incorporates your calendar, lists, tasks, basically kind of an all-in-one view of what you've got going on for the day or for the week or for the month. And we don't know of any feature that is upcoming related to that. The closest thing would be the Teams app within the Tasks app within Teams that provides you a little bit of that functionality. But we did want to mention and show where you can find information if you're looking for what is coming up. So I don't know whether or not you're sharing, Mitch, but basically if you go look up for Microsoft Roadmap, their Microsoft 365 roadmap, you'll get to a site that's like this. This includes everything that Microsoft is publicly disclosing about what's upcoming. So you can filter that by like product. So if you wanted to look at what's upcoming for, let's say, SharePoint. So if I click SharePoint, you can see anything that was in development, rolling out, or launched for the particular product. This would give you information like, for example, SharePoint's updating the site header options, and it gives you a little bit of detail about that. It also tells you where it's launching and when. So it says this was launched, and it says December 2020. So you can use this to kind of find information about what might be upcoming. You can also search at the top. For example, if I wanted to search for calendar, you can look at the calendar view that would be built in. They're talking about that's rolling out, quote unquote. But as you can see, it's been rolling out and was supposed to be done in 2020. Some of these dates can be really misleading a little bit, but honestly, it's the best thing you have. This is the only publicly available information about new features coming from Microsoft. The other thing I was going to mention is you can make requests for features. So if you feel strongly, Microsoft in the past has been using user voice. They're transitioning that into some more in-product tools. So as an example, if you go into Outlook and go into Help, there's an option that says submit a feature request. Feel free to do that. Say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what it would be. And they do look at that feedback. So that's the first thing we've got. The next thing, we got a question from somebody saying, hey, I work in a factory, and I'd like to be able to share videos with all employees, but not everyone has email, not everyone has a Microsoft account. How do I make that happen? So the first thing we would talk about is, again, the best way to manage this is to get everyone a license and get everyone an email. So that would be like an F1 license, which is really, it's for frontline workers. It's really targeted at like an email, access to Yammer, access to Teams, access to SharePoint. So it's a very limited license, so the cost is much less. But obviously that's not right for everybody. If you don't want to do that, that's all right. because I'm not here to try to convince you to buy a license, but I do think that that's the best way to manage employees. So if you don't want to do that, your only other option would be to use a SharePoint site that has external sharing. And I'm going to walk through that a little bit and show a couple options. So again, I don't know if we're sharing. Hopefully we are, Mitch. So basically, I've gone into SharePoint and I've created this site. And so this is just a demo site, basic settings. And if I go into the actual contents of this, the default settings that I have for this tenant for right now is if I try to go in here and share, it's going to say only within my environment. So I can add additional people, but it's only people within my organization. Obviously, that's not what you want, because then they would be required to have a SharePoint or an Office 365 account. So you don't want that. So this site actually won't work. How would I then go about making it so that I could use it? To make it work, you really need to go into the policies. And if you look at
we got a ping on Teams, Matt. It looks like we're not sharing.
Oh, we're not sharing? Mitch, do you know?
Yeah, it should be. I'll switch something.
We're doing sharing a little bit different this time, so bear with us. Hopefully, it's if somebody, when they see it, could ping on the chat, that would be
I get some additional metadata in. So let's take a quick look at how I did that. So the first thing to remember is that in our OnStart, in our application OnStart, we make a call out to Office 365 to get the available rooms based on the time selected or the default time. And so then I've already got that data. And so then in the onVisible of my room select screen, let's go take a look at that real quick. I'm doing some additional work to get the additional data that I need. So if you remember what I just said, we pulled in the data from Exchange or from Office 365 about the rooms, and that actually comes into ultimately this available room email name collection. This was, if you go download the Book a Room template from Microsoft, this is the name of the collection that they'll actually use. And this happens to be the name of the collection that is by default used by this gallery. So in this case, you'll note that I've changed this collection to use a new one that I created, and I'll show you what I did to create that right now. So we'll jump back to our room select screen on visible method. Open this up, and so here I have all my available rooms are in this collection here. And so now I'm going to show you how I pulled in the metadata. So what I essentially do is I create a new collection. And in this case, I was real creative with a name. I basically named it the same thing and added meta to the end to represent that I'm adding some additional metadata to it. And what I'm essentially doing is I'm adding columns to an existing collection. So this is my original collection that's defined here. So I'm adding additional columns to this. I'm calling that additional column room meta. And I'm getting that data by looking up in my room data list. So this is a SharePoint connection that I have in my application. So I'm simply looking up data from that room data list, and I'm matching the title in the list to the email column that comes from my available room email name collection. And so then all of that to say that's basically building a new collection that has the room meta column available on it. And the room meta column is a little bit deceiving. It's not just a column, it's actually an object or a complex type. And so it has multiple columns in it representing each of the individual metadata fields, and I'll show you how that's used in a minute. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm simply creating a temp collection, and I'm assigning my new meta collection to that collection so that I have an original copy with all of my available rooms in it based on that initial view or onVisible of this particular screen. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I am subsequently applying a filter to it. So based on some variables that I have, like capacity and the type of room that the user is looking for, I am filtering my collection that I'm using in the gallery based on, so if the user is looking for a room that has, greater than or equal to 5 people or a size of 5, or they're looking for a workspace versus a conference room, I'm applying this filter. And so this is where I'm actually applying the filter, and ultimately that filtered version of the collection is what shows up in the gallery. And because I'm applying filters in other controls elsewhere on that screen at a later time, Having this temp collection allows me to go back and say, okay, rebuild my collection for the gallery based on that temp collection because it has all my rooms in it. So I'm basically filtering in memory inside the application. So I get my initial set of data, join my SharePoint data to it. So now I only have the available rooms with their metadata, and then I filter based on that data. So let's take a quick look at how those fields on the room meta column actually work. So if we look at this gallery and we go to our fields, you'll see that it says we have 5 selected. And you'll see in here that we have a few different things that are going on. In the title, we're just choosing the name. But in the button, which is this little conference room indicator, or this workspace type indicator, I should say, we're basically looking at what type of workspace it is, and we're doing that based on some of that metadata. And the way that we're referencing that is basically this item dot room meta, so that's that column that we added. But room meta has a number of columns inside of it. One of those is room type, which is a choice column, which means it has a value and an ID, and so we're getting the value. So we're simply saying in this case, and let me jump over to this version of this so you can see it a little bit easier. Actually, should be able to go here. Yeah, so this is basically what we're doing. If the room type value is workspace, then show WS, else show conference room. And so then you hide this. If we go look at, for example, our filter, in this particular case, we can come in here and we'll run this. And if I want to filter based on workspace, you'll see that it filters for workspaces, else for conference rooms. And so this is the part where on change of this particular selector or this filter, it's basically going back and refactoring our data. So if we go here and we go look at on change and open this up, we'll see that we're basically resetting that collection for the gallery based on my updates to my filters. That's basically what's going on here. And that's the short of it. Hopefully that helps answer that question. I know there's some detail there, but that should get you to the next place you need to be.
Cool. So the next question we had related to the gallery view within the Lists, Microsoft Lists app. And the question was specifically, hey, you guys did a video on it, why am I not seeing it? So first of all, the way you would see it, just to clarify with everyone, you would come in and look at, like for example, to create a new view, and you would have this gallery option as an option when you create a view. The reason it's probably not showing up has to do with the fact that, again, if I go back into the Microsoft 365 roadmap and filter this for SharePoint and then come down to and look for gallery view, you can see that gallery view is currently in development and the release is August 2021. So it's not rolled out to everybody. Our tenant, we have our tenant and our users configured so that we get kind of pre-released versions of content or of features. Not everybody has that enabled. In addition, even if we were in a regular preview, they don't roll these features out to everyone all at once. So it kind of rolls out through different tenants as time goes on. So it could be a month or better before everyone in all of Office 365 gets all of the features. So right now, if you don't have it, my guess is it hasn't come to you yet. And hopefully, based on what they say here, it would be this month, so August 2021. Now, just to be 100% transparency, a week and a half ago, this was July 2021. So these things are in flux and change, but again, this is the best, most updated information that you can get related to that type of content.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. The next question we had revolves around components in Power Apps and whether or not importing and exporting components is deprecated. And I will tell you, it's on its way to being deprecated. You still can technically do it. I'll demonstrate here really quickly how that plays actually in a Power App. I've got a really simple little Canvas app that I put together. There's really nothing in it. The intent here is to kind of show the setting and how you might import and export. So we'll load this up. And so initially you have your screens and your components. And what you would normally expect is when you go to create a new component, you have an option here to import or export, and it's gone. You'll notice in this particular Power App. If you want to bring that back, because you really need to use it, you can simply go to the settings of your application, and in the upcoming features, this is changed a little bit probably in the last couple months, but you now have like a preview, experimental, and retired. And this particular one will show up under retired, which basically means it's going away. But if you turn this on and then jump back into your application, you'll see you have the option here to then import and export components. So for the time being, you can still do that. Ultimately, the recommendation and the reason that this is going away is that the recommendation from Microsoft is to use component libraries to be able to facilitate bringing components in to an application.
Cool. So let me see what the next one is. Oh, yeah, so the next question that we had was related to, specifically to the help desk app, but I don't know that it's anything really specific to the help desk app. So specifically they were saying, hey, I tried to grant myself admin permissions, but I kept getting an error message saying I'm not an admin. A lot of that, we believe has to do with the OnStart. So the way that in that particular app was built, to configure someone as being an administrator, you set the settings in a variable that executes when OnStart happens within a Power App. And unless you actually force the OnStart to run, you're not going to actually be an admin yet. So likely when the person closed the app down and opened it back up, they all of a sudden became admins, but they just didn't realize that they needed to do this. I'm going to walk through what that looks like just so everybody kind of sees. So if you look at this, this is just a blank canvas app. I'm not going to try to show it in the help desk app because I think this is a concept that you can apply to any app. So in this case, let's say I have a label, and the label is existing on the page. And if I go into the app, and if you click the ellipsis, you can actually go and look at the OnStart right here. And I can do something like, let's do Matt. So I can set this, right? And then I can go into the text box and set the text of this to be, I think I named it name, right? So at this point, let me not like that. There we go. There we go. So right now, you'll notice that there's nothing there. But why is that? Because when you go in here, I clearly set it to Matt. It's because just because you're on this page doesn't mean that the OnStart has actually run. So I actually have to click here and click Run OnStart, and you'll notice that it now says Matt. If I change this to something else, and I click off, again, it's not going to change. The only time it'll change is if I were to close this out. So if I saved this and reopened it,